The earliest I remember about plays or anything dramatic has to do with my exposure to Cebuano drama. I even remember the name of the program. It was called Bako sa Kasing-Kasing. And it was very early in the 60s. And we used to listen to it all the time. There was Bako sa Kasing-Kasing radio drama. So there was a Tarzan-like figure called Kurak. I remember this. We used to listen to it all the time. And my brother and I used to listen to it, Batan. And then I also remember that my nanny, I refused to go to sleep until my nanny finished telling me a story. So, and she complained to my mother one time and said, I'm out of stories. So I was always interested in storytelling, or I wanted to tell my own stories. So I listened to other people's stories. So I think that's how, but they were always dramatized. They always took the form of dramatic writing. So I think that's where I got it, except that my father was a poet and a short story writer, or fiction writer. I wrote fiction for a long time, and I didn't really write my first play until I was at Silliman in my junior year. And that was actually published in the Free Press. It was called Deeper Than All Roses. And that's when I discovered that I loved writing plays more than I loved writing fiction. So when I got into NYU, I decided to major my graduate studies, my MA in English Lit, but I also got involved with theater. So, and in 1986, I wrote my first play, and it got produced. It got produced right away. It was called State Without Grace, and it was produced by Pan Asian Rep, which was at that time the only Asian American theater company in New York. It was staged at the university. Yeah. But it was actually beginner's luck, because it was my first play and it got produced right away and it got reviewed by the New York Times. That was huge. And that was quite an achievement. But then I got married after that, and then I stopped writing for 7 years. So, because I was raising my son. So I thought it was easy. But then it's been a painful, painful struggle for Asian American playwrights. I'm a storyteller. You know, I tell stories about what it means to be human. I tell stories about the complexities of the nature of the human condition. I know it's a huge thing to say, but it's very complex, our human experience. And I like to tell stories about that. But I also want to have fun telling them. And I don't have moral lessons. My plays don't have moral lessons. I don't preach, because I don't know the answers. I only ask questions. Human experience is very nuanced, and this is what is lacking today in our political discourse, because everyone's so polarized and everybody has an opinion, and I have a hard time navigating through that environment, because I grew up on nuance. You know, I'm an English Lit major. I grew up in nuance. I get off on how complex people are. And my role as a playwright is as a storyteller. I'm a child of the West, so I have a Greek, I come from the classical Greek tradition. So I have the Aristotelian, does it have a beginning, middle, and end? I have Freytag's 5-paragraph structure. And basically I'm interested in plot, character, theme, and language. And spectacle and song are two elements that I don't have a focus on. But I'm a child of the West. But at the same time, it's only a framework. I depart from it every time I write. It's a framework from which I depart when I do nonlinear. But I have that framework. You know, who was it who said that it's nonlinear writing is poetry is like playing tennis without the net. It's kind of like that. I have a net, but sometimes I don't play with it. So, but that net is classic. It's Greek. The other thing I love about the theater, going back to the theater, is that it's the only genre that takes place in a space that's face-to-face, and it's live. It's the only art form that's live. It's like it can't be digitalized. It's not digital. It can't be zoomed. If you zoom it, it's something else. It's a different genre. So it's kind of, theater is analog, and it's live, and that it's in the here and now, and that's why I'm very attracted to it, to those possibilities. Mostly it comes from my interest in a specific issue. For example, my first play was about abortion. It's about a Catholic Filipina who has an abortion. And this is in 1986. Was born and raised Catholic and had an abortion. And she comes to she goes home for a visit and has to deal with the matriarch of the clan who raised her. And so it's about, so I was very interested in that issue because it was stunning to me that they would have this issue. And this was a live issue when I came to the States in the 70s. So, and it's still an issue today, you know. And so issues trigger plays in me. Sometimes they're experiences that people tell me, or sometimes they're experiences that come from my own life, but they get expanded so much that they're no longer my own. It becomes the play's specific reality. For example, there's a play called Woman from the Other Side of the World, and this is very funny. My mother sent me a babysitter who had a visa and was able to send her to the States to to be a nanny to my son. And later on, she revealed to me that she heard voices. Okay, so in the States, it's considered a mental illness. But half of me was a Filipino and said, everybody hears voices in the Philippines. I have cousins who say they talk to St. Jude every morning and St. Jude answers back. And it's like, I write about those kinds of things, they're cultural collisions, you know, between Filipino values and American values. And those issues trigger plays in me. There's a play about a mail order bride who goes to Brooklyn, and she falls in love with this man, with her husband, who's white, with a white man, and it just happens that of course the white man is abusive, but he's sympathetic. I made him sympathetic. He's not a terrible man. He's human. That's a terrible thing to say because the Me Too movement will get me for this. But the issue is that she gets a monthly raise She gets a raise every time she has an abusive episode, every time he subjects her to an abusive episode. So the family becomes more well-to-do as she is more entrenched in this dysfunctional relationship. But as I said again, I don't have any answers to that because everybody has his perspective. No one is guilty, but nobody is innocent either. So it's very complicated. What makes it different is that he is human and that he's not a demon. He's not a regular, stereotypical white male abuser. I mean, I've met American men who have fallen in love with their mail order brides, and some of them are happy. some of them make it. So that informs the way I write about these people. Oh, it takes forever. It depends on the research. I would say an average would be 2 years for a play. I marvel at people who say, oh, I did one play. They write 7 plays in a year. I don't know how they do that because I do a lot of research. There was one play that was commissioned to write about a profession. And I decided, I've always been interested in people who build skyscrapers. So I said, I write about construction workers. Iron workers, they're called. And this one was about a man who's gay, who's an iron worker and outs himself at work, and what happens in his workplace and what happens to him. It was called Walking Iron. That was commissioned. It never got produced. It went as far as a staged reading. I have to do research because it's not coming from sometime. Like they say, write about a specific profession. And I said, well, I want to write about skyscrapers and how to build them. That took forever to write because I had to do research. I had to talk to construction workers. I had to talk to the union steward and so forth and so on. I remember talking to the union steward and he was saying, what is this play about? He said, it's about a gay construction worker. And says, huh. But he was very cooperative. Yeah. But that was a difficult play to write because I don't know anything about it. I think that it's all, if you have imagination and you can do research, you can write about anything. I enjoy writing plays in the States because I help empower people to discover or to learn about Filipino-American culture. And it's important now for representation. It's important for Americans to be aware of the other so that the other disappears. And there's just a human being in front of you. That's the other thing that I don't like about what's going on in the culture in the States is that the cancel culture. It's like there have been several people who've been canceled because there was one writer who wrote about a Latino experience, but she was not Latino, and so they canceled her. So it's like I said, I'm very interested in K-pop. And somebody asked me, how could you write about K-pop? You're not Korean. I said, that makes me angry, because I'm a writer. I tell stories, I imagine them, and I do research. Because I don't know anything about Korea. But then I started researching on South Korea. It's like, oh my God, this is so alien to me. So I'm not sure if I'm going to end up doing it. But it was just interesting that the first question that got raised was, how can you write about K-pop? You're not Korean, Because I don't like that when they say that black people should only write about being black. or Asian American should only write about being Asian American. White people can write about anything and everything. I want the same thing for us. Oh, and there was another one called Requiem. It's about an anti-Marcos dissident who escapes to the United States, and the anti-Marcos movement there is a cause celeb in the community, and he makes it. He has an agent. He is seduced by American affluence, and he falls in love with the Filipino-American. They fall in love, and so he has to decide whether he has to come back home or not. And he decides to come home for the cause. And he dies. That's terrible. But it happens. Short plays are like one act. All right. And the big plays are full-length plays. The short plays, some of them were commissioned. I had two, actually, that were produced. And one was called Duet, which had nothing to do with Filipinos. It was a story of two siblings, and only one of them could pursue a musical career. And the father had to choose which one. It was a brother and sister. And the whole play was about which one was going to get the scholarship. And it turned out that the father chose the man because he thought that the man was weak, and that if he didn't get it, his life would fail. Whereas the sister would be strong to handle the failure. The Female Heart, it was the mail order bride. And God, Sex, and Blue Water was about a faith healer that exhibited stigmata, whose mother hung from a cross every Lenten Friday, every Good Friday. And they decide to immigrate to the United States. And the mother wants to recreate the Passion in Hoboken, New Jersey. So that was what that play was about. And the daughter, the protagonist, falls in love with a wealthy American man who considers the stigmata a psychological disorder. So there again was a collision between the secular and the religious. I've actually written 18 plays, and half of them got produced. Okay, and the latest one was Dance Me. That's the one that's being read on Sunday, and it's about ballroom dancing. But it's set in New York among Filipino-American, and I had to figure out how to explain the nature of the DI business, because they don't have DIs in New York. But this girl wanted to recreate the DI business in Queens. And the studio is on the brink of bankruptcy, and so they have to try to save the studio. And so they have this banquet for a 70-year-old matriarch from the Philippines, and they're trying to recreate the ballroom dancing with DIs. And so, and it's also, so a lot of what I do is that I write about cultural collisions, about the conflict between Filipino values and American values from the point of view of an immigrant. It's not basically from the point of view of the children of immigrants, because I consider children of immigrants Americans. So there's not much, that's a different kind of conflict, the conflict that Filipinos experience, the parents experience, than the children. Those are different conflicts. And dance me is 3 generations. Yeah, it has 3 generations: the grandfather, the father, and then the daughter. And the daughter wants to save the studio, the father wants to let it go, and it's kind of, and the daughter, the American, the Filipino-American, wants to hold on to the legacy, but the father wants her to be a lawyer. So it's those kinds of conflicts. Oh, and the other one, actually, the female heart is about that mail order bride. I actually even made her come from Smoky Mountain before Smoky Mountain came. And the only reason why she has to keep working is that her brother is a macho dancer and has AIDS. So she can't pull out of this relationship. But it becomes more and more painful for her. What I did that I thought was different was that I didn't condemn anyone. I didn't condemn the husband. I didn't condemn the brother. It was third world poverty, actually. I was trying to deal with that. And in the face of American affluence and American dysfunction, how do you navigate through that? I know when that happens. It's actually a process that I go through. When I cry, when something about the character's predicament moves me and I burst into tears, I know something organic and authentic is happening. And that when I felt bad about my Adelpha, about my mail order bride, with being caught in that situation, that was one experience. And I felt bad about the gay guy who's being harassed and bullied in his workplace because of who he was. That's when I know I have something that's working, that the character now has a life of her own, that she can move me to tears, that I stop being a playwright and I become a character of the play. When I write, it's because I have a play in mind. And I had a schedule. I wrote every day from 10 o'clock in the evening until 1 in the morning when I was raising a family, and when I was married and I was raising a family. You can have me anything, any way you want, but after 10 o'clock, go to bed. I don't want to know where your socks are. You don't want me to tell you where to find anything. So it was 10 to 1 every day, except holidays and weekends. And that's how I ended up working 9 to 5, raising a family, and writing 18 plays. That's why today I'm not writing anything. I'm lazy. My son says, you've earned the right to be lazy. Well, I hope that's true because I can't write. I'm not writing at the moment. The thing about plays is that once you're into it, it has a life of its own. And so you're just actually describing what's already happened. That's my process. So it writes itself. The other one that I wrote before Dance Me, we were talking about full-length plays, was the first time I wrote about white people, about a Caucasian American woman who's a Buddhist dying of cancer, and she wants a good death. And she's married to a Filipino who's also a Buddhist. But they don't really know how to do the Buddhist rite of dying, the Buddhist funeral rites. And so they have to learn it from scratch. And I didn't know either when I was writing it. And so I had to do research. The thing, what I wanted to write about is cultural appropriation. It's like just this white woman who was raised Christian decided to be a Buddhist. and wanted to have a Buddhist funeral rites. And it turned out a comedy because no one knew how to do it. Like she would have, so they decided to have her, so no one knew how to do it. So, and it was actually a play about letting go, even letting go how to die a Buddhist, which is a Buddhist idea, you know. But because she was so particular about, so she would summon everyone and clean up her karma, quote unquote, and she would summon everyone and ask them to be forgiven, and it created a lot of havoc because nobody wanted to. As her daughter says, just because you're dying, it doesn't mean I have to tell you anything. So that story wrote itself. It didn't need any research because that's how my sister-in-law died. She's a Buddhist and she wanted to have a good death. As I said, I'm a storyteller and I like the fun of telling them. Okay, but the other aspect of my playwriting role, the role of playwriting, is being able to show people the elements that go into the craft of playwriting. And of course it's driven by it's driven by a classical structure which in the postmodern sense doesn't make sense anymore. But I disagree with that. You have to have some kind of framework. And I wanted to share that framework with my friends. And this DNP would never have existed, would not exist without them. I mean, it's just, it's nothing without them, you know. So all I do is just provide them the resources. And I have a specific playwriting model that I share with them and which I hope they follow, which they would also use as a framework. What that is that providing them with a vocabulary of playwriting, of the craft. I admire and respect what they've done with that work. It wouldn't exist without them. Well, the model that I have is that they are sequestered for 3 days. They stay in a hotel for 3 days and they can't leave. So they stay there 24 hours a day. And the whole session is made up of segments. And it's actually just driven by 5 questions. Well, first of all, you need a trigger. I need a photograph. And this photo triggers stories in their heads. And then they write a narrative based on the photograph or triggered by the photograph. It doesn't have to be based on the specifics of the photograph. You look at a picture and you say, what triggers, what memories, what stories does this photograph trigger? Okay, and then they write the story and then they create 2 characters from that story, and then we go by guide questions. Who is the main character? So there's a protagonist and there's an antagonist. So the protagonist wants something. So the question is, what does the protagonist want? And the antagonist keeps him from getting it. Write that conversation. So that's how it starts. It's very easy, actually, the way I talk about it, but it takes them. But at the end of the 3 days, they have a 15-minute play. Okay, and that play is then revised throughout the 3 days. That play is revised, that structure is revised. And then they read it in front of a public. So we invite people to listen to the plays. They read it themselves. And then a week later, I subsidized an acting group that was run by Banawi Miklat Jansen, who is from Manila. And she conducts an acting workshop using the plays. Then they have another reading of the actors. So I don't know how many actors she got, but this model, playwriting model, can only handle 5 playwrights. But I think she got 10 actors. So they are all DNP fellows. So that was what was going on for every year, for 3 or 4 years. And the grant ran itself out, but I intend to revise the model so that it can be continued next year, except they're no longer going to be sequestered. It's very funny because I just saw something that was a good example of a trigger photo. It's about a guy who's doing macho dancing in the marketplace, and he's doing it with vegetables around him. That is a great trigger photo. You know, what's going on here? One of the things, we were talking about language, right? This is more intensely now than ever, is that Cebuanos now express themselves using Ceblish. So one of the questions that you asked, is there a tension here with foreign elements? Because I'm driven by foreign models. And then I realized that we're really a hybrid culture, and that I also clip on YouTube where somebody was asking Cebuanos to explain something using only Tagalog, and they couldn't do it. They had to use English. And it was very interesting to me that that's who we are now. And I don't know what that means, but there's no more tension between English and Cebuano. Why should that shouldn't be surprising, but I don't know what that means in terms of language skills. One of the things that comes up for me is that it's how much of that is the success of colonialism. That's what I'm saying, is that we've been hybridized. And it's really interesting, given what they say about the decline of the West. It's given the representation and problems, given white supremacy issues, given American colonialism. It's really amazing how successfully they have colonized our neural networks. I was a monitor in my high school. If you spoke Cebuano, I'd 45 centavos. I was an American tool. Yeah, but that was basically for the market, because the more these people speak English, the more we could sell to them. I would go for the female heart, I think. In fact, it's being pitched right now in some other company, and I hope it goes through. I think because it focuses on a sibling relationship. And I think because also the way the family takes care of each other, self-sacrificing, this self-sacrificing characteristic of each other, of what they have for each other, is for me very Filipino, and it affects a lot of people who watch it. And they put, what do you do if your family needs you, and in order for them to survive, you have to suffer? I mean, that is a dilemma. And it's, yeah, you might say it's my favorite play. In order for them to survive, you have to suffer. How do you do that in the face of the American attitude of, oh, you know, pursuit of happiness? My individual happiness is more important than my brother or than my mother. I mean, and she is in the States, and she's aware of this attitude. How do you solve it? 3 months later, so they now have a relationship, Roger and Adelpha. Roger is the husband, and Adelpha is the... So now they're in a they're kind of a stable relationship. So Roger comes home from work, and so Roger says, so what's with the dress? Adelpha's shopping now. She's become... Adelpha, it's a Donna Karan. I thought you liked it. Roger, no, I don't. It's too short, too tight. What are you trying to prove? Adelpha, you bought this for me. And Roger says, hon, I'm playing. So because they do role play, all right. So Adelpha, oh, okay, pushes him back. Fuck you. They laugh. Adelpha hits him hard. He hits her back. Roger, oh yeah? Let's do it. Aroused, he pins her down. She struggles. Oh, she's feisty tonight. Say the words, Adelpha, say the words. Adelpha, no. Roger, no. Adelpha, make me. Roger, oh yeah? Roger pulls her hand and she grabs the headboard as if she were being bound and tied to it. They are breathless with laughter. Roger exits. Roger off stage. Okay, hon, ready? You're gonna do it this time? So this is the role play. Okay. Adelpha, yes. Roger, okay. Adelpha, overcome by giggling. Save me. Roger, I can't hear you. Adelpha, save me, white man. Roger runs into the room and mimes rescuing her, a damsel in distress. They erupt into paroxysms of laughter. A few beats, and the laughter recedes. They begin kissing each other. A few beats. Then Roger pulls out a cord from his back pocket. He pulls Adelpha's hands and begins tying them together to the headboard. Adelpha, what's that? What are you doing, hon? Roger, it's you who need to trust me. Will you trust me? Adelpha, yes, I trust you, but what are you doing? He tugs at her tightly. She winces. Roger, please. Adelpha, honey, this isn't fun. Roger, I'm sorry, but he tugs at them some more. Adelpha, no. Roger, please, on top of her. Adelpha ferociously, I said no. Get the fuck off me. Roger steps back. And then there's a letter from Angel, the brother. Your letters don't sound like you. Remember the snow, your first Christmas? I can't hear your voice in my head. And there are my dreams. Last night you wanted to tell me something, but I couldn't make out the words, your face hidden. What do you want to tell me? Why do I dream such dreams? Back to Roger. What I do to you, this is not who I am. I wish I was someone else. I'm so aware of what's wrong with me, but it doesn't keep me from hurting you. I could go back to therapy and talk until I'm blue in the face, but it's still like turning over mud. I have so much love for you, I can feel it. This sweet, solid thing that sits in my heart waiting to be free. Someday soon, I promise. It's gonna happen, I feel it, but you've got to believe me. Adelpha, you know what I want? This moment now, when I'm crying and you're sorry and I believe you. I feel hopeful. Hope is a wonderful thing. You can see the stars. Okay, the thing about a play is that it's just a script, really. It's not theater. The play is actually the production that you see on stage, and what I write is actually just a script. It doesn't become theater until the director comes in, the stage designer, the music composer. A lot of playwrights will disagree with that because they're so, oh, I'm a playwright. But really, it's only if it stays on the page, it's not a play yet. It's literature, but it's not drama. So it's just a script. But it has to be produced, and once it's produced, then it becomes theater. We need more playwrights. We need playwrights. We need plays. And we need playwrights who write about the Cebuano, the nature of the Cebuano condition. I don't know about other playwrights, but the greatest challenge for a playwright or for when I play is making the characters believable. Character development. How do you create a human being who abuses his wife? How do you sit there and accept him as a human being and not as somebody who should be condemned? That's the greatest challenge, to make characters believable, that we can relate to their humanity, no matter how they're drawn or no matter how they live their lives. Because it's kind of hard these days because our politics is so polarized. Like in the States, you're either against Trump or pro-Trump. It's anti-Trump or pro-Trump. And I'm in that position. I hate Trump. I can't stand him. And I'm virulently, I have ideas about the politics in this country regarding Marcos, regarding Duterte. And so how do you, I heard this story once about how Benigno Aquino and Ferdinand Marcos had a one-night session in prison before he was sent to the States or something. Because when he came back, he got shot. He was shot. But before he was sent, before he left for the States, Marcos visited him in his cell, and they had a one-night session. And apparently, they were frat brothers. What a wonderful scene that is. I wonder what they talked about. I wonder what it was. And nobody took notes. It's just the two of them, and no one was there. I wonder what they talked about. So in that sense, if you see Marcos as a villain, maybe not in this scene, I don't write about villains because villains are not interesting to me. It's like I love Marvel. I love the superheroes, but I never write. I don't know, maybe they've changed. Maybe they've become more human. I don't know. I understand that they've become more human. But that's a challenge for me, is how to write about character. It's not so much what they do, but who they are. It's not about plot. It's about character development. Don't do it. It is, maybe it's easier to get produced in Cebu. I don't know, but if you go to the United States, I'm still struggling. It's a struggle. It's a struggle. I remember one time in the 80s when I was trying very hard to get myself produced, and no one was reading my plays because even my agent, I found an agent, even my agent said, I can't sell Filipino-American plays. Filipino-Americans don't go to plays. Yes, they do, but they go to Broadway. They don't go to off-Broadway or off-Broadway. At the time when I was writing, they were not, Lea Salonga wasn't around at that time. I mean, they were very, in fact, when my plays got cast, we had to use Chinese. My grandmother was Japanese in LA. My grandmother, my lead was Portuguese. I mean, it was because there were no Filipino theater artists. I mean, think of it. If you're an immigrant parent and you've come to the United States to give your children a better life, and one of your children comes to you and says, Mom, I want to be an actor. That's like, what? So, or I want to write plays. I mean, there's something about us, you know, and I think it's Asian parents as well, you know. It's like, no, do law first, you know, do. And so what I do is that, my experience is I meet a lot of Asian Americans who are accountants, lawyers, doctors. Then they finish that, not doctors, nurses, they finish that, and then they write plays. You know, they go do accounting, and then they finish that, and then they write plays. I never see myself playing a historical role. That sounds very self-centered. I've never seen myself as a historical figure. I'm very gratified to hear that, but I just see myself as a playwright, as writing plays, writing a play that needs to get produced. My advice, it's a tough craft. So you gotta see a lot of plays. You have to find yourself a community of playwrights. You share your work, you learn from each other, and you have to be humble because you have to revise a lot. Revise. So every play is like a work in progress. You know, it's not like once you have a film set that's frozen. A play isn't really frozen. Never gets frozen. I just read about somebody whose play got produced and was published and is still revising it. You know, it's a living thing, a play. So it needs work.
I remember Dr. Hope you actually invited Willa because she was tapped by the daughter of Cornelio Faigao, Ma'am Linda Faigao, who wanted to already come back to Cebu and give back, of course, by sharing her expertise, her knowledge, her training in New York, in Broadway. Is it Broadway or off-Broadway? She also has written a collection of her plays. And so she wanted to come back and train Cebuanos to playwriting. With that Cornelio Faigao, that actually led to my interest again. No, I think I felt that at the time when I did that show for that play for UP Cebu, for a while I went back to poetry, I went back to writing plays, short fiction. And then came Cornelio Faigao's daughter, Ma'am Linda, and it sparked again my interest in drama. After that, I sort of really made it one of my interests to really give a focus on plays and playwriting. Although I still love the usual, the writing of poetry and fiction. But the drama has really has made I think is now a special, it has a special place actually in my heart, no, kanang I've really made it also a point to never forget that ko ano what I learned from my trainings in drama, and really try to write scripts as often as I can. Today, because sorry, if I may go back to that Faigao, no, the training in Faigao was also very interesting for me, because in the SM with the UP Cebu training, they provided me another perspective about drama, but with the Faigao, it also gave me another. There are different methods in drama, putting up a play in theater, and then that is also applied actually to playwriting. So these two trainings provided me a perspective on how I can create kanang plays bitaw in different ways. So I felt I was so privileged to know these things, to be provided with the opportunity to learn about these things, and with koan pa jud, no, with mga world class trainers, no, or mentors for that matters.
But I met Ma'am Linda back then in 2011 through Tatay Al Evangelio. So Tatay Al introduced me to her. She's my friend, and she's now in New York. Oh, I was very excited, enthusiastic. And then Ma'am Linda said, Eman, can you meet me? This was back in 2011. Yeah, during that time, bago lang siya na biyuda. And then I could still remember, we met in Casa, not Casa Rosario, but this other Casa, which was now wala na, but it was in Baseline Mango. And she said, I want to do a playwriting workshop, and it's gonna run for 5 years. So I thought it was just like, in passing lang, ganahan siya mag-playwriting, but didn't really take it seriously. And then she returned 2013, and we met again, and she did a one-day workshop in UP Cebu. And then I always had stories in my mind, but I felt I needed a certain structure. I needed tools. That's what I was seeking for back then. But because of that one-day workshop she had in UP, I was able to write my first play, The Surge. Good thing, CTU deloaded me during that time. I was not so busy during that time, so I said, maybe I'll devote myself to writing. It was a one-act play. And then 2014, I had a formal training na gyud with the DNP, the Drama and Performance, the Cornelia Faigao Playwriting Workshop, which was with Monsignor Ting also, who facilitated, was also the production manager. It was in St. Paul's Seminary. Then I wrote Disney X. That was my second play. One thing I notice about me when I write a play is I always start with characters. Easily fall in love with characters. I don't start with the plot. I always start with the characters, their backstories, what makes them complex, what makes them human, what makes them bad, and at the same time they can also be good. So Disney X is a comedy, but it's underlain with darkness. It's about child abuse, and there were undertones of about rape, childhood nostalgia. Because of Ma'am Linda Faigao, she really has a strong influence in terms of my approach to the craft. Number one, it's very traditional. It's Greek, like you have to observe the unity of time, place, and plot. Yes, it's very Aristotelian. And then it should be character driven. You need to see your characters develop at the end. An epiphany of the character, a realization of the character at the end is already considered character development. That's what she always tells me every time I write a play. And then she would always say, avoid expositions, information must not be revealed right away. It must be elicited in between the conflict of the two characters. You need to observe what is opposed, what's thwarted, and then once that conflict is established until you reach to the climax, and then you can reveal all those information, and then all your scenes or that scene is motivated.
So Eman was the one who really influenced me to write again, and this time for a dramatic performance, which was the reason why I luckily got in at the Cornelio Faigao writing workshop, which was my very first, should I say, my rite of passage and also like my baptism of fire, because you have Faigao at the national stage, and it was really very colorful with Faigao, because I learned that I need a lot of tools to write. And when I encountered the formidable Linda Faigao, and oh my gosh, I'm now really being mentored. I was now being mentored by an authentic, a legendary playwright. And here was Linda Faigao telling me, Christian, your play isn't working. And then I was left with only like 24 hours to overhaul the play. That play which I wrote as an output was a story which had the aswang as the trigger. And when Mom Linda told us to, free write, I mean, unconsciously, I didn't really write about the literal aswang, but it was the monster behind the stigma of HIV, because I had a friend who was diagnosed back then with HIV, and he happens to be very close to me, which was why siguro I felt all the pain as well, and it unconsciously emerged in that play. And this was a play where this very formidable character revealed to his discreet boyfriend that he was HIV positive. So that was the story.
The DNP style, the listen to your voice style. When Ma'am Linda Faigao had the workshop with us, we were given only like 2 days. So in the morning we had sessions like, she gave us the trigger. The trigger was a picture about a door with a chair looking from the outside. Missing Bising also had the story episode, because in the beginning I had the person that was on my mind was Orlan Magno, getting old and then sitting on the chair and looking outside from the door, and he gets lonely because his son was in the States. So he was waiting for his son. That was my original concept of Missing Bising. It was not entitled Missing Bising. I think I forget the original title of that. So that was my story. That was the story that I kept on writing on my storyboard, morning until afternoon. Evening, I went home. And then Ma'am Linda said, you have to submit the draft. You have to submit the draft by midnight. So that, yes, because we need to study it in the morning. So I went home and I sat down on my laptop, and then as I was going through this story, I was eating chicharon. I couldn't get the rhythm of the serious play. And I said, I hope Ma'am Linda will not castigate me, but I'm going to change the whole thing. That's what's the trigger. So I started thinking of Orlan Magno again, but this time, because I need to have a conflict. And I have to put in Heidi Palapan in the picture. So Orlan Magno and Heidi Palapan were conversing. So that's when Missing Bising came about. So I started writing the story, and then I was eating, the rhythm that was running on my mind, I was eating the chicharon and the suka and then it became like, yeah. So that's how Missing Bising came about. So I submitted the draft. This time it was now in the script format. It was not just a storyline. So I was kind of advanced in that regard because Ma'am Linda would have to go through the storyline first and then the script format. But what I did was just put a one-page story outline, and then I started writing the script. So I was advanced in that regard. And then when I submitted to Ma'am Linda the following day, it was discussed, and then she said that you're not supposed to change anything. I said, I'm not changing anything. I still retain the character of Orlan Mano. I just changed, instead of the son, he would have a daughter. So that's how about it. And then, when we started reading it, so until I think I only had like 2 drafts of that because the first draft was okay, and then Ma'am Lina just added some points, and I had to rewrite it and draft 2, and I was done. And it was now ready to test it. It was now ready for reading. During our reading with the playwrights, doing the reading, it was okay. It was Serbian reading the part of Orlan, and it was Heidi reading her part. So it was good. But when it got to the actors, workshoppers, because our formula for DNP is that you write it here, and then it goes to a reading by actors, workshoppers. Okay. But when it went to the actors, workshopper, I said, the actor reading the part of Heidi did not read it the same as Heidi did. Now I said, I might have a problem. I think there is a problem with the way I wrote it. So I consulted Ma'am Linda. I was asking her, like, Ma'am Linda, should I rewrite, like, this actor did not get the gist, this actor did not get the concept, this actor did not get the character. Should I put in the actor's dialogue, the actor's direction, so that she would understand it? You know what Ma'am Linda said? No. Your play is not the problem. The problem is the actor. So I said, okay, so I will have to retain this one.
Linda Faigao-Hall is a Filipino-American whose work often deals with both the daily lives of Filipinos in the United States and with her personal experience of living in New York. So in her plays, both as text and as performance, Faigao-Hall seeks to recreate and to give representation to her community and, of course, to herself in a venue that, often minimizes her significance, but I would say that, the stage is the stage, so you can have huge presence there. Now, her plays merit critical analysis and popular attention because she successfully combines contemporary characters and plots with, lyrical dialogue, and she skillfully blends spiritual quests and revelation with life's innate sensuality and vulgarity, and finds humor in tragic social situations without dismissing their importance. Her work can enhance discussions of Filipino-American drama because it reveals the inner workings of communities that limited notions of Philippine identity and writing have often rendered invisible. Linda Faigao-Hall's plays have been staged several times and have been produced off-Broadway, and also has been anthologized in The Female Heart and other plays. So this is the book. And in addition, she has been very open to discussing her work. The critical attention she has received and her accessibility actually make her an excellent candidate for studying diasporic playwriting. And, particular issues, themes, and characteristics significant in the Philippines as well as America frequently surface in her drama. And there are important aspects which include political, social concerns of local communities and the centrality of family and heritage, the landscape of natural conditions of American life and culture. One of the characteristics of Faigao-Hall's writing, I would say, is an emphasis on dailiness, on the nature of living within a social fabric, a fabric that may seem hopelessly torn, but which is always somebody's duty to repair. And she addresses, blood families and other families, their food and communal occasions, their disintegration and reconstitution in a changing culture, relationships between mothers and children, and between women, between classes, and the illusory nature of maturity. It is said that the immigrant experience depicted in her plays resonates with her life. And Linda was born in the Philippines. She migrated to the US in 1971 after graduating with a degree in English and theater. And she studied in New York, actually at New York University, where she received a master's degree in English. And she worked for a doctorate degree in educational theater with a semester in medieval drama at Breton-Hall College in England. She worked as a college instructor and as information systems director in a social work agency. And she was married to an Irish American, and she has a son, all of which they are said to find echoes in her work. The first play of Faigao-Hall that I had read was, Woman from the Other Side of the World. This was written, I think, in 1994, which talks about two women who both come from the Philippines and migrate to the United States. One is Emilia, who is an unhappy Americanized career woman, and the other is Ines, her son's nanny, who believes in Philippine traditional folk magic. Now, Emilia is stressed out, she's a working mother who had to contend with a series of babysitters for her son, Jason. She also has a very confusing love life. Her boyfriend here is George, who is of Filipino descent. Emilia is a common stereotype of a Filipina who disavows her past and embraces an immigrant's reality of crass materialism. She is eager to adopt American culture and says that, I love this country more than I ever loved the Philippines. Unlike Ines, who is this other Filipina, also migrating to the United States or migrated to the United States, she does not believe in folk tradition. She says that, this is America and there's no magic here. So Emilia is really assimilated. And this is actually a part that I really love in the play because of the, you can say, double entendre, or the double meaning in the term there's no magic here. Of course, when a character wants to pass for white, it can only mean assimilation. But come to think of it, what does it mean when you say there's no magic? Is it that nothing magical can ever happen? Which is actually another point that is taken up in the play by the character of Ines, this other woman. Ines is Jason's babysitter, or what we call here Yaya, and she brings magic with her and transforms Emilia's life by recalling her troubled past. Emilia has successfully buried this past for so many, many years, but with Ines, they are brought back up. And in the play, we learn that Emilia was forced to marry the sugar magnate Don Leon, back in the Philippines. We also learn that she suffered from his emotional and physical abuse, and because she could not take it anymore, murdered him. So no one knows this but Emilia, and she bears this guilt over this hidden crime which has affected her life negatively in America. Ines uses a duende or a dwarf to assist Emilia in confronting the extremity of her situation and in releasing her from the guilt that she has been feeling. So this duende enacts an exorcism to save Emilia and Jason from further misery. The play's magic is really with Ines, who provides the narrative's meaning of transcendence. Americans are very pragmatic, and so unlike Filipinos who appreciate, life's spiritual dimensions. So for Americans, it may be impossible or inaccessible because they're so practical. The play actually posits a different way of responding to the world, a different way of looking at things, and it's very, very Filipino. Sometimes you can say it's quite funny. It's a show of cultures, but what is actually being forwarded is the acceptance of dreams, the myth, and the occult. I wish, we had a clip or we could watch the film so that you can understand what I'm talking about. But if you get a copy of the book, it's there. Leave the rest to your imagination, but it's really a brilliant play. And there was this critic, Gary Storhoff. Actually, Gary Storhoff had reviewed the play and said that this work of Faigao-Hall blends contemporary feminist issues and the exploitation of the Philippines and the difficulties that Filipinos face in America as they assimilate to a different culture. Now, Faigao-Hall introduces Filipino myth and folklore to comment on contemporary issues. It's a device confronting many Americans like, domestic abuse, third world poverty, homophobia, and other issues. Faigao-Hall also takes up more common problems like dating, finding a good man, finding good babysitters, surviving at jobs that barely pay the minimum wage. There's a lot you can find in her plays. So in effect, one of the interesting things that struck me in this play is the mode of writing, which is, magic realist. I'm sure that literary scholars out there know what I'm talking about. When we talk about magic realism, we immediately think about American writers like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Julio Cortázar, Manuel Piuch, Isabel Allende, among others. But one of my former professors, Dr. Erlinda Alburo, will always contest this, saying that, we predate the Latin Americans because they wrote about it, but, it happened here. It happens here a long time ago. It's just that they wrote about it first. So it would seem that we had it late. Now, the boundaries between fantasy world and the real world in Faigao-Hall's plays are gradually erased and eliding the audience's presumption that common sense, rationalist interpretation of events can easily be discovered. Now, this realist narrative is disrupted by the interweave of magic and the supernatural, which is so common in the Philippines. I remember Linda saying that it's very common for Filipinos to believe, without apparent contradiction, in the mix of Catholicism and folk religion. And this is something that scholars have been writing about, syncretic Catholic folk or folk Catholicism. The predominance of the spiritual actually is present in another of her plays, which I also enjoy. This is The Female Heart, and this is the title of that book, The Female Heart, the title of the anthology and her other plays. there is a seriousness of the spiritual dimension of life that is actually enacted not by the characters in the play, but through staging. There is a division. The stage is divided between the real narrative time and the memory of Adelpha. Adelpha is the character, one of the characters. The memory of her life when she left the Philippines. But I think if I go through it this way, you might not be able to follow me. So, the play actually begins in Smoky Mountain, which is a Smoky Mountain in Manila, and Filipinos are familiar that this is actually a huge garbage mound where about 30,000 people scraped together a life. Now you have Angel and his mother Rosario, who try to make ends meet, and they pick scrap metal and other garbage, useful trash from the refuse that they find day to day in Smoky Mountain. Adelpha is Angel's sister, and she is able to attend high school because she is quite intelligent, and she graduates from her class as valedictorian, or from high school as valedictorian. Now, after Angel hears her valedictory address, he is convinced that she should continue her studies and he will pay for her tuition. He will get a job as a dance instructor at a big hotel, but actually, he is a macho dancer come prostitute gigolo at the red light district of Manila. So there's some kind of deception here. Now, as a result of sex work, Angel becomes ill and Adelpha becomes a mail order bride to find money to pay for his medical care. So she corresponds with Roger, who is a real estate broker in Brooklyn. But, Roger has actually anger management issues. Although, Adelpha does not know this when she marries him. But she marries him nevertheless on the condition that he sends money, $300 a month for Angel's treatment in a private facility in the Philippines. So in the beginning, it seems like a fair trade between the two. But as she starts to confront Roger's violence, she is regretful because every time Roger grows more controlling, he forbids her to work or to study and compares that sort of attitude with his former wife who ran off with somebody else. He also makes her dress in ethnic, exotic clothes and forces her to have brutal sex. And this way, he can increase her monthly fee. So what do we have here? In a sense, Adelpha prostitutes herself because of her family. And but Adelpha is clever, like so many other Filipinas out there. In a sense, too, it gives them a certain dignity, a nobility even, but it's sad because it can just be too much. So the theme of self-sacrifice, both on Angel and Adelpha's part, so that the ones that they love can be saved. Repeatedly, the characters assume each other's burdens while in the process putting their own hopes and dreams in abeyance. Faigao-Hall talks about the virtue of compassion, which is said to be that of a female hearts. Pusong babae, she says. And she does not even shy away from the difficult moral questions that the subject raises. Now, I also enjoyed the fusion of Filipino and American sensibilities, which is clear in both plays. And for Faigao-Hall, a lot comes from that kind of Filipino tradition, which is why her plays are, wow, wonderful. You have the irrational, the indigenous, the mystical, and they are brought together with the Western, and this is what makes it just, come out. And just like we have fusion food or fusion fashion. So I would suggest, really read Faigao-Hall, and you have so many plays in this book. Actually, you have 4, and there's also reviews here by, the preface is written by Luis Francia, a wonderful preface, and afterword by Ian Morgan. So get a copy of this.